As a bisexual woman, I have one request to the rest of the bi community. Can you please stop attacking lesbians? Thank you.
Betty Who is a deeply, deeply entitled white woman.
It's not a crime to be straight, while also dragging Renee Rapp into it to legitimize her position as apparently a queer straight woman.
I never liked Betty Who. I've never liked her fucking music. I think it's trash.
Because who the fuck is taking this shit serious?
So, Betty Who. I have not thought about Betty Who since like 2019 or even earlier, maybe 2018, when I was watching The Bold Type and there was a clip of Betty Who in The Bold Type where she's performing at a concert and I was like, who is this performing in this show? And then she sang a song and I was like, oh yeah, I've heard this song before. That was the last time I thought about Betty Who, and rest in peace to The Bold Type. I really miss you. I fully believe The Bold Type is like Sex in the City, but for Gen Z. I feel like Sex in the City is for like not even millennials. It's for like the generations before millennials. And then Girls is for millennials. And then The Bold Type was for zillennials like me. Betty Who. She has been saying some controversial things and some plain wrong things about other members of the LGBTQ community. And I've seen some interesting things about Betty Who since this controversy started. And number one is that she has been married to a man for several years, and even when she was in a relationship with a man, she publicly identified as a lesbian, but has recently come out as queer or bisexual and has said, yeah, I was dating a man all of this time. And that has left bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, and a lot of people really dislike this about her. Something interesting I discovered as I was reading about Betty Who is that she played Persephone in Hadestown in 2024, and I love Hadestown. I had no idea. So she's apparently really big into theater. Literally, I only knew her from the Bold Type episode, and now Betty Who is everywhere. So she recently went on a podcast and publicly dissed lesbians and said that you should hold space for people who only date women and identify publicly as lesbians, and then years later they come out and they're dating a man, and that they feel persecuted and we should feel bad for them.
Because I'm 21 years old, that I have to say I'm a capital L lesbian.
Right.
And you fell in love with somebody. I know, like I'm a queer person who was like, I'm probably going to grow up to be gay. And then became obsessed with a boy.
Right.
And it's the best thing that ever happened to me. It doesn't mean that I am not queer and that I don't represent or like love the queer community and exist in the queer community.
Yeah.
And so I urge, I think a huge theme of this entire conversation for both of us has been to allow ourselves to make the choices that feel right in the moment that they feel right, because a huge part of queerness is like identifying yourself and putting yourself under like, alphabet mafia. It's like, which one are you? And if you change that, I will never forget it,
Right.
So I think that as much as, like, it's funny that Renee Rapp is like, you'll never catch me dating a man. It's like, go off, queen. Like, I love that for you.
Right.
But I also hold space for her in 10 years if she goes, oops, I met the love of my life and it's this man. I didn't mean to. It's
right.
like, that's okay. It shouldn't be illegal for you to fall in love. It's kind of like, now we've come so far that our community is so strong that now it's like a crime to be straight.
Right.
Honestly, cheek. It's like, I do love that we've come full circle. Punishing people for being hetero feels like sort of correct. No, just kidding.
That's very interesting. I find this very interesting. I'm so glad all of this is happening in the summer of 2025, because in the summer of 2023 is when I realized I was not a lesbian, and I had been identifying as a lesbian, and I realized I was also attracted to men, and I came out as bisexual. So I've had 2 years to marinate over this experience, and now it's not been a hot lesbian summer, because you had Fletcher coming out and saying she's in a relationship with a man after people thought she was a lesbian. You had Jojo Siwa, who is a very prominent lesbian, coming out as not a lesbian, and now we have Betty Who. It's like the three horsemen of the apocalypse, of the lesbian apocalypse, apparently. Honestly, I think Betty Who, though, should get the most negative feedback, because I personally didn't think Fletcher did anything wrong necessarily, and the thing that Jojo Siwa did wrong was cheating on her partner, which, lesbian or not, is a terrible thing to do. But I think Betty Who should get the most negative feedback because she is publicly dismissing a lesbian artist in her statements dismissing an out lesbian and saying that out lesbian may one day end up with a man. And these statements have absolutely nothing to do with her own sexuality and her own journey of acceptance. And she is dating a man, centering herself in a conversation about lesbians and claiming that the community has perpetuated harms against her. Oh, we're 3 minutes into this video and I realized I didn't do an introduction. I'm Liz. Welcome to my corner of the internet where I talk about whatever's on my mind. And yes, I consider myself part of the LGBTQ community and I wanted to respond to this. So several other people on TikTok have responded, and I want to center the voice of lesbians because they are the most harmed by these conversations. And someone I think that really said this pretty succinctly, pretty well, is Kat Ebbs. Kat is also from Down Under. I think Betty Who is maybe from New Zealand or Australia. I kind of conflate New Zealand and Australia as like the same place, even though I know they're separate. It's kind of like Hawaii and Alaska. Like, well, I think of them as like, oh, those two states that none of us get to go to because they're far away. So Kat Ebbs is from Down Under. I don't remember if they're Kiwi or Australian. And Betty Who is also from Down Under. And the interesting thing about Kat Ebbs, and the reason I think their voice is so important in this conversation, is Kat Ebbs was dating JoJo Siwa when JoJo Siwa went on Big Brother, cheated on their partner, and like started dating a man. So Kat could say a lot of really nasty things. Like, Kat has the right to be as salty as they want to be. But instead, Kat has been super gracious about this whole situation, and I admire them for that. And it also posted a video calling out Betty Who and explaining, you know, the harms of this kind of conversation towards lesbians.
We're avoiding TikTok because this app is insane, but when he's gonna rant with me. If anyone doesn't know who Betty Who is, she's like a singer, performer. She's actually Australian. I have been a fan of her work for a while, as someone that loves the theatre. And she went on a lesbian podcast and essentially said being with a man was the best thing that ever happened to her, and that she thought she was a lesbian, and then she met her husband, and that she's holding space for Renee Rapp to change her mind and marry a man in 10 years from now. And again, using this rhetoric that we have seen time and time and time again this year, where people that either were bisexuals but in sapphic relationships, or were lesbians and realized that maybe they weren't, are using this language as if the queer community or the lesbians are some vile species that are gatekeeping people's sexuality or forcing people into certain sexualities, or are going to crucify you for being with a cis-het man. I love the bisexuals, but y'all give the bisexuals a crazy rap when you start acting like this. And the language that these public figures use, especially again in a Trump era where queer people's rights are in question, you think it's okay to come on a podcast and say, when was it a crime to date a man? You want to know what actually is a crime? Being gay. In many places in the world, being gay is a literal fucking crime. So for you to sit there and act like you are oppressed or challenged in some way because you were in a cis hetero relationship, you lost me. And it's honestly my last straw. Just say you're dating a man and call it a day. No one gives a shit. It also reinforces this really ugly trope that lesbianism or queerness is a phase. This is something that I have contended with my whole journey of coming out. Not only when I was in the closet thinking that my feelings were frivolous, stupid, not real, but even as an out gay person, this kind of rhetoric makes me like panic when it's like, no, you're just living under heteronormativities, which is thrown in your face left, right, and center, to the point where Snoop Dogg thinks it's unsafe to go to the movies with his child because he has to explain to them how two mums adopt a fucking baby. And to reinforce that trope, when you have profited off queerness for a portion of your career, literally go sit with the homophobes and the Trumpies at the back, because you probably have more in common with them. Because you want to know who I hear say shit like, oh, one day you'll be with a man? Conservatives that are coming for our rights. I get that in my comment section all the time, especially post the shit that I was thrusted into against my will on a public platform. Don't even get me started about how laced that was with queerphobia. Don't even get me started. But bottom line, no one cares that these public figures are dating men. Slay bisexuality. And yes, anyone that makes it about that, it's biphobia, call it out. The issue is people discovering something about their sexuality or being in a heterosexual relationship and acting as if they're oppressed, or throwing the queer community under the bus in that pursuit, or using language that reinforces a really problematic trope that queer people are waiting to be saved, especially when those people have profited time and time again off their queerness and or off the queer community. Post a picture of you and your cute boyfriend or your cute husband and keep it pushing.
I don't really think there's anything more I can add about like how exactly harmful what Betty Who said is to the queer community, but I did want to talk about this as a bisexual, and I wanted to like establish some ground rules, if we could call it that, for how bisexuals could talk about their bisexuality and maybe identifying as a lesbian in the past, and ways that we can keep ourselves from perpetuating harm. So this is a call out to my fellow bisexuals and pansexuals and queer identifying people, how we can talk about our sexuality without harming other members of the LGBTQ community. So first of all, it's not you versus the LGBTQ community. I don't think we never ever should pit ourselves against other members of the community. And you know, there's a lot of attacks on LGBTQ people. There's attacks on trans people. There's attacks on gay marriage rights. There are so many ongoing attacks happening in the United States, especially, that we do not need to spend our energy trying to find ways to argue and make the rest of our community feel othered. Being in a straight passing relationship is not the fault of lesbians. Like, you don't need to blame lesbians because people think that you're straight because you're not a lesbian. You can present your bisexuality without being frustrated that other people don't clock you as a member of the LGBTQ community. And I get it. Bisexual people kind of have to work harder when we're in a straight passing relationship to be clocked as members of the LGBTQ community. And you shouldn't blame other members of the community because straight people think that you're heteronormative. In fact, if you are being a great member of the community, people will realize that you're at the Pride Parade, you're at the Pride March, you're donating to LGBTQ causes, you are fundraising in the community out there, you know, helping members of the community get the resources they need, you're reading LGBTQ books, you are doing things that make people think, are they gay? But they're dating a man. Like, that is something that's happened to me, is like people have literally asked me, are you gay? And I'm like, straight people have asked me. And I've been like, when I'm at Pride, they're like, why are you at Pride? I'm like, I'm bisexual. And yes, I do have a boyfriend. Thank you very much. And so the responsibility to present yourself as a member of the LGBTQ community is your own and doesn't need to fall on the shoulders of lesbians because you are no longer dating someone of the same gender as yourself. And I think also, as a bisexual person, it is so important that we don't center our safety at the expense of others, and feeling uncomfortable because you present as heteronormative in a queer space doesn't mean that you're not safe. And in fact, our community is really, at this time, is like since I've become an adult, our community is facing some of the biggest challenges to our safety that we have ever experienced. Right now, this week in Florida, people are literally chalking a sidewalk where I think it was two people, shot up a LGBTQ nightclub that was targeted because it was queer, part of the queer community, a memorial to the 49 people who were killed at a place that was supposed to be a safe haven for the LGBTQ community. And the government in Florida decided to paint over this memorial, and now members of the greater Orlando community are like coming together, and they have a state trooper posted there to like scare people away from trying to memorialize these members of the community who died at the Pulse nightclub. And that is like the kind of bigotry and erasure that the LGBTQ community is facing. We have Kim Daniels, who refused to grant marriage licenses to LGBTQ couples in Kentucky, trying to sue and go all the way to the Supreme Court to overturn marriage equality in the United States. We have bans on trans healthcare. We have bans on trans athletes. We have so much going on, and like being uncomfortable because people think you're straight and don't immediately clock you as a member of the community, even when you hang out in queer spaces, is not a matter of your safety. And something that was said in the interview that people just really got frustrated with is like Betty Who said like, oh, like it's like scary to date a straight man. It's like scary to be in a straight relationship, and like I could be hated for being in a straight relationship. And the thing is, you're not hated for being in a relationship. Reason that people are getting like negative feedback to you is because you seem to have turned your back on the community by saying that the community is terrible and that lesbians can go out and date men. And that's the same thing with like Jojo Siwa. Jojo Siwa came out and said, oh, people forced me to be a lesbian. I'm like, no one forced you to do anything. You're the one who was like dating women and like proud to be a lesbian and making music about the sapphic experience. And so people were like, oh, she's a lesbian. And now that you're bisexual and you're straight passing, then you can publicly tell like other people, like you can publicly hate, or you are publicly hating on the LGBTQ community, and that's making people feel frustrated. And you're the one perpetuating harm and then saying that the community is being hateful to you when you're the one actually causing harm. And what's so upsetting to me about that is like there is real biphobia out there. Like there are real bisexual people do face biphobia. They're like, as a woman, there is safety issues when I would tell men like, oh, I've dated women in the past. Like there is a relative fear, like, oh, I've dated, like if I was to tell a straight man on a date like, oh, I'm into women too, like feeling unsafe about that. Like I don't know his reaction, like like maybe he didn't notice that I marked myself as bisexual on Hinge. Like maybe he'll react negatively to this and this date could quickly not be safe. And yeah, that isn't a real experience that bisexual people experience and biphobia in the world at large, but that is not coming from the LGBTQ community. I would say the vast majority of biphobia is coming from straight people. And if you're going to talk about like the public safety of being bisexual and like the things that bisexual people experience, then you should also talk about like the actual trouble, like the actual problems that bisexual people face, especially here in the United States. We know that bisexual people face the highest rates of intimate partner violence in the LGBTQ community. And we know that bisexual men of color, bisexual black men, bisexual Hispanic men face the highest rates of HIV and sexually transmitted diseases than any other member of the LGBTQ community and among straight men, especially in the South. Like bisexual men in the South have the highest rates of HIV. And part of that is the stigma of bisexuality in those communities, in poor rural communities, and the fact that they don't have access to the healthcare they need. And these are problems and struggles that the bisexual community does face. And you are not being persecuted for dating a straight man. Like you can't, like you claiming, oh, I'm uncomfortable with telling like people I'm dating a straight man because people thought I was a lesbian for a long time. It's not a struggle. Like it's your own personal, like, internal struggle. I will say it's an internal struggle, but it is not a community struggle that needs to be overcome with a community. And thirdly, this is my 3 points for bisexual people. Being bisexual and being in a heteronormative relationship does give you privilege. Like you do experience privilege. When people discriminate against LGBTQ people, you will not be clocked as queer in the same way that a lesbian couple will or a gay couple will. And if you are not in community with LGBTQ people, you are shielded from the problems that LGBTQ people experience, and you have the safety of a heteronormative relationship to fall back on. You don't have to worry about your marriage rights getting overturned. You don't have to worry about being denied adoption rights to your own child because they were born, because if you're in a two-mom or a two-dad family, they were fathered or naturally born by somebody else. You don't have to worry about your access to sports being banned because you're not trans. You don't have to worry as much about your public safety when you go out with your partner in public. And that is a level of privilege that you should acknowledge. And not acknowledging that privilege comes across as tone deaf and using the LGBTQ community. If you create music and market to the LGBTQ community without acknowledging your privilege, it does feel like you are using the community and you're using them for clicks and views. And not only do you have a level of privilege, but when you say comments about lesbians turning bisexual or the fact that they could date a man 10 years down the road, that creates real harassment and harm for lesbians, because that stereotype that a lesbian just needs a man to fix her is a real stereotype. It is a real harm. And you stating that a famous lesbian pop star could date a man in 10 years just perpetuates that real lesbophobia and like the real terrible way that men treat lesbians in public. And I want to end this by sharing this writing that I found from Lydia Jupp from the Star Observer. The concept of intersectionality does not exist for us to play Oppression Olympics with, as feminist activist Elizabeth Martinez coined it. It's a framework to help us understand each other and the ways in which we can best deconstruct the systems that are oppressing all of us. With her comments, Betty Who is perpetuating real and harmful ideas that don't just harm lesbians, but sapphics at large. She wants to convince us that despite the legal and social protections her marriage with, again, a cis straight husband affords her, it's these very protections, the same ones that queer people have fought for decades, that are marginalizing her. And I think that is like the most frustrating thing about this whole podcast that Betty Who went on, is that she is inadvertently or purposefully attacking the LGBTQ community and not the system that is stacked against LGBTQ people. And while we're all outraged at this, as we react to the Betty Who's, the JoJo Siwas, and the Fletchers of this world, it is important to note that the online outrage is not where this conversation should end. It should end with our everyday involvement in our own communities, because whether you're bisexual or not, it's up to us to be in community with marginalized folks around us. For me, the Queer Trans Project is headquartered in my city, and it is in a group that I can like actively go to a donation drive and drop off trans healthcare supplies for these folks. I can show up at a fundraiser and buy a coffee in support of my LGBTQ community. Like, I can show up at Jacksonville River City Pride and like march for LGBTQ rights. And like, if I was in Orlando, I could show up and help, re-chalk the sidewalk, the crossing where the Pulse Memorial was, that the government here in Florida is trying to erase. Whatever it is in your community that is needed to help fight the marginalization and the struggles that LGBTQ people face, that is what being a member of the LGBTQ community means. Pride is a riot, and to be proud with the LGBTQ community means showing up, giving back, and pushing back against government overreach and against a government that wants to take away human rights from our community. And yeah, that is how I wanted to end this video. I didn't want to just be like, Betty Who is making us mad, because it is true. Betty Who is making me very, very frustrated, and I cannot believe that this is the third former lesbian identifying celebrity to say and act really stupid and make all of us bisexuals look like selfish idiots. That's literally what's happening here. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. I took some time off. I was in the UK and I came back and I was enjoying not making content for a bit. So I took some time off. I also have my wisdom tooth removal on Friday, tomorrow, as I'm filming this. And I wanted to say a big thank you to my YouTube community. I had over 500,000 views on my videos in July. And the best part about that all is that is what is paying for my wisdom tooth surgery, because I was unemployed, got laid off, and I didn't have I had no extra income coming in except from YouTube. So I'm very thankful I got paid in like the middle of August from YouTube, like my YouTube paycheck for the views that happened in July. And I put that in the bank, and then I scheduled my surgery. And the reason I could schedule my surgery to get this tooth out before it infects my molars and causes more problems is because of everybody watching my YouTube videos in July. So a huge thanks to everyone who showed up in this community. Thank you for all the support as I went through my second layoff in 2025. I have now started a new job I hope to continue. My plan is to make a new video once a week or so. I want to continue to make videos about whatever's on my mind. So if you see something that you think I should make a video about, send it my way. I might be interested in it. And I will see y'all all around the internet. Until next time, see ya.
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service.